He tilted his head and captured her lips in a kiss. It was a kiss that spoke of longing, of unspoken emotions, and of a connection that had been building between them. She knew she needed the potent antidote as soon as possible, but leaving without being noticed would be difficult. She decided to sneak into Tariq's room. Hasana's heart pounded in her chest as she carefully crept into Tariq's room, her eyes scanning for anything that could tie him to the poisoning of his father. She searched through drawers, rifled through papers, and checked every nook and cranny, but found nothing of significance. Frustration was building within her, but she refused to give up. Her eyes fell on Tariq's laptop. She prayed it wasn't password protected, but when she opened it, her hopes were dashed. It was indeed locked. Desperation fueled her as she tried various passwords, but nothing seemed to work. Panic set in as she heard the door handle turn. The door swung open, and there stood Tariq, his face twisted in anger. "What the hell are you doing in my room?" he screamed. Hasana's mind raced. "I was just cleaning the room," she stammered, hoping he would believe her lie. "Get out!" Tariq bellowed, his voice echoing through the hall. As she went back to work, she pondered her options. Searching Tariq's was a close call. One afternoon, after putting away the groceries from a shopping trip, Hasana was approached by Ismail, Tariq's loyal servant. "Rami has asked you to go shopping for him," he said. Her frustration boiled over instantly. They had just returned from the market, and he had previously said he didn't need anything. So why was Rami asking now? She almost marched up to his room to confront him, but stopped herself, remembering her place. She hated the fact that he was doing this to taunt her. Swallowing her anger, she stormed outside to hail a cab. As soon as she stepped onto the driveway, a massive security guard held her from behind, pressing a cold gun to her waist. "Get in the car," he ordered. "Try to run, and you're dead." Fear gripped Hasana as she was shoved into a dark, eerie-looking car. Her heart sank when she saw Tariq seated beside her, a chilling smile on his lips. "Well, hello, Hasana," he sneered, his voice laced with sarcasm. "You can't just spend all your time with my brother, or do I not deserve some time with you? Sit tight. Let's go for a drive." The car sped off, taking them to an unfinished story building on the city's outskirts. Tariq led her to the roof's edge, where the wind howled around them, whipping her scarf into her face. He stared down at her, his eyes cold and calculating. "Do you know how easy it would be to throw you off this building?" he mused, his voice casual, as if discussing the weather. Tears streamed down Hasana's face as she fell to her knees, sobbing and pleading for her life. "Please, sir, I beg you. I didn't do anything." Hasana's eyes widened in terror as he continued. "I know you touched my laptop. Don't lie to me." She gasped for air, thinking of the most believable lie to get herself out of that situation. Her voice barely a whisper. I've never seen a laptop before. I never went to school. I was just curious when I saw it sitting on your desk. I didn't know it would upset you." His eyes were cold and his movements were deliberate as he motioned his guard to grab her to the edge as she screamed for her life. "You've been acting strange lately, Hasana," Tariq continued. "Always lurking around where you don't belong, asking questions you have no business asking. Hasana's heart raced as she thought of the possibility of her life ending at that moment. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't know anything. I am just a busybody who likes to ask questions. Nothing more," she replied, trying hard not to look down as she cried. Tariq's smile widened as the massive guard pulled her away from the edge and grabbed her by the neck, lifting her effortlessly, like a rag doll. Hasana's breath caught in her throat as she struggled against his grip, her vision blurring from the lack of oxygen. "You're nothing, Hasana," Tariq sneered, leaning in close. "You think anyone will care if you disappear? You belong to my family for the next 20 years. Sorry, 19, now that the first year is almost up." Tariq's eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with malice. "Curiosity can be dangerous, especially for someone like you. If you cross me again, I won't hesitate to eliminate you. And don't think for a second that your family is safe." Hasana's heart pounded in her chest as he continued, his words like venom. "Your family, they mean nothing to me. If I wanted, I could take your house, have them thrown out on the streets, or worse, have them disappear just like you would. No one would miss a few peasants." A sob escaped her lips as the enormity of his threat sank in. Tariq was ruthless, and he wouldn't hesitate to destroy everything she held dear. "You're lucky I'm feeling generous today," Tariq spat, slapping her hard across the face. The force of it sent her falling onto the rough concrete. He tossed a few bills at her feet, his smirk returning. "Buy yourself something nice." Leaving her trembling and alone on the rooftop, Tariq and his goon walked away, their laughter echoing in the distance, leaving behind the money Tariq had thrown to her. Hasana cried as she struggled to find her way home, her heart heavy with fear. That night, as she lay in her bed, the reality of her situation crushed her. She needed to do something for the sake of her family. Life under Tariq's rule would be nothing short of a nightmare if his father died from the poison. He had the power to destroy her family, take their home, and end their lives. His threats were all the proof she needed. Tariq was willing to do anything to eliminate his father, and she was trapped in his twisted game. It was time to get help. The one name that came to mind was Rami. He was the only solution to her dilemma. The next morning, she hurried to his room, her heart heavy with urgency and fear. She knocked on the door, and it was opened by a gorgeous girl wearing a sweater Hasana had given Rami as a gift. "Yes, can I help you?" the girl asked, her voice cool and uninterested. "I'm here to see Rami. I mean, Sir Rami," Hasana replied, her voice trembling from the shock of seeing that Rami had moved on so quickly. Was she just a plaything for him, so much so that he had forgotten her? Rami appeared behind the girl, a frown etched on his face. "What?" he blurted out, his tone sharp. "We need to talk," Hasana managed to say, her voice barely holding together. "There's nothing to talk about," Rami retorted. "Please, Rami, it's urgent," she pleaded, desperation coloring her words. "Rami?" His voice dripped with contempt. "Since when did you think it appropriate to call me by my name? It's Sir to you." "Now get lost," he said, blowing smoke in her face as she coughed, tears welling up in her eyes. He slammed the door in her face. She returned to her quarters, her mind racing with plans. She needed a new strategy. She couldn't do this alone, but with Rami so angry at her, she had to find another way to gain his trust and enlist his help. As she lay in bed, Hasana thought about the girl she had seen in Rami's room. She has pretty much the same frame as Hassani, the same complexion, just a little taller. As nature called, she thought to herself, he sure does have a type. The following morning, Hasana decided to try a different approach. She waited outside Rami's room, hoping to catch him alone. She needed to speak to him without any interruptions. When he finally stepped out, dressed to go golfing, she stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Rami, please," she said, her voice steady. "I need to talk to you. It's about your father." Rami looked at her, his eyes narrowed. "What about my father?" She grabbed his hand and took him to the garden behind the tall mango tree, away from being seen. Still holding his hand, they stood there, eyes on each other, just breathing. He hated her for making him feel the rush of dopamine all over his body. How could she be so beautiful, even in a maid's clothing? Hasana, realizing how long they stood, by silence, let go of his hand and took a deep breath. "It's about your father's health. I think he's been poisoned." "You think? By whom, why, and how?" "I have reason to believe that Tariq is poisoning him. I need your help to prove it and stop him." Rami's expression hardened as he listened to Hassana's desperate explanation. "Poisoning? My brother? You must be delusional, Hassana. It's laughable. Tariq would never harm our father." Hassana's fury boiled over. "You think this is a joke, Rami? This is your father's life we're talking about. Stop being so nonchalant and listen for once." "Go back to work, Hassana," Rami retorted, his voice dripping with disdain. "And stop smoking, whatever it is that's making you come up with these crazy stories." Her anger flared. "You arrogant, self-absorbed. Fine, go back to your tiny girlfriend. And of all shirts, you had to give her the one I gifted you." "Oh, so that's the issue? You're jealous?" Rami shot back. "Hassana, you turned me down. What did you expect me to do? Wait, beg you." Rami begs no one. Their argument escalated, voices rising and emotions flaring. Finally, Hassana snapped. "I'm going to Masubiram with or without you tomorrow. I need the antidote." Turning away, her heart heavy, Hassana left Rami standing there, bewildered. That night, she cried herself to sleep, feeling more alone than ever. The next morning, Hassana woke before dawn, determined to sneak out unnoticed. As she approached the gate, she was startled to see Rami leaning against his car. "What are you doing here?" she asked, looking shocked. "Did you think I would let you go on such a long trip all by yourself?" "Hop in," he said, his voice softer than usual. She could have slapped him for making her cry the night before, but she held back and climbed into the car. The journey was long and rough, the road ahead filled with silence and tension. When they did speak, it inevitably led to more arguments. As they arrived at the outskirts of Masubiram, the sun was beginning to set. Rami parked the car and suggested, "You go ahead, I'll wait here." Hassana shook her head in disbelief, but complied, determined to get the antidote. She found an old Baba by the road and explained her need. He examined the sample she showed him and immediately recognized it. "It's too late to pluck the leaves now," the Baba said. "You will have to stay the night. You came at the right time. We celebrate the beginning of the harvest season at midnight. Once you hear the fireworks, you know it's time." They looked defeated, as there was no other choice. The old man found them a small inn and checked them, into separate rooms. As the lights went out, Rami tossed and turned. His head was pounding. He missed Hassana's presence. Unable to take it any longer, he got up and opened his door, only to find Hassana standing there, about to knock. They stood still, staring at each other, the tension from earlier melting away. "Hi," Rami said, almost breathless. "Hey," Hassana responded similarly. Rami took a step closer. "I know how you feel about being my maid, but for tonight, let's be equals. No titles, just us existing as man and woman, as lovers. No rules." She nodded in agreement. They embraced, their lips meeting in a passionate kiss that melted away the pain and uncertainty of the past few days. They spent the night talking, laughing over silly things, holding hands and smiling until their cheeks hurt, as they sat watching the last of the fireworks fade into the night sky. Hassana turned to Rami with a soft smile. "Thank you for believing me, and coming all the way to Masubiram with me." Rami smirked, teasing. "Who says I believe you?" Hassana's smile faltered. "Then why did you come all the way here?" she asked. "To spend time with you because I missed you," he chuckled, playfully nudging her. "But honestly, I took a giant leap of faith. I wasn't sure if I believed some random shopkeeper's theory. But after our argument, I couldn't figure out why you'd lie about something so serious." He paused, his tone growing more serious. "So, I went to see the family doctor, Dr. Yusuf, and he told me he hadn't seen Baba in a while. Tariq fired him, gave a flimsy excuse about him being too old. That's when I knew something was up. This doctor had been with us since birth, through everything. I had Dr. Yusuf draw Baba's blood, pretending it was on Tariq's orders. We'll have the results in a few days. But until then, I'm here, taking this leap of faith with you." With that, Rami gently kissed Hassana's forehead, letting the warmth of the moment settle between them. Under the colorful fireworks and the pouring rain, they danced together at the festival, laughing to their heart's content, forgetting the outside world for one night. The next morning, they were up early, meeting the old man who guided them in, plucking the antidote. Rami and Hassana stole glances at each other, their bond strengthened by the previous night. The journey back was filled with quiet moments of shared understanding, the countryside blurring past as they drove back into the city. The car pulled up to the mansion, and Rami turned to her. "Thank you for sacrificing a lot for the sake of my family. Now you have me. We can do this, Hassana. Together." She nodded, squeezing his hand. Together. On getting back to the Al Karim estate, the servants were shocked to see Hassana drive in with Rami. The manager, who had been ready to scream insults at Hassana, shut up upon seeing her with Rami. For the rest of the day, every servant Hassana came in contact with threw glances at her, almost as if they hated her for being so close to Rami.